from America's finest city. This is Real Talk San Diego on ESPN 1700.
What's happening, gang? You are back live in San Diego for The Secret Stash. I'm your host, Jesse Ibanez, tracking down some important local people, talking about some important local things. Who knows? Maybe catching a story or two in the process with the singular goal of leaving you a little better than how we found you. And by the way, if you want to learn more about me and what we do, I guess you might say during our day job, Adrian, we are the founders of the Greenhouse Group. And we help folks get into and out of homes right down here in the heart of San Diego, moving people with purpose. So if you're in a spot right now where you're looking at those interest rates, you're going, hey, hold on. This is pretty cheap right now. Wouldn't mind getting something for myself. Or if you're on the other side of that spectrum, you're seeing how much your neighbor's house just went for, might be a good time to go down to thegreenhousegroupinc.com and click on the Meet the Team. Learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do. Hanging out in the studio today, though, something that I think that's germane, definitely, to what it is that we do. A theme that comes up quite a bit is exactly what happens, right, when you're in a situation where, and this could go across the gamut, but Marilyn, we see this a lot, like with disputes with family members and even maybe people that don't, they think they don't need enough structure in their life because they think they're young and they got tons of time to break stuff and still make stuff happen in their income. Or maybe it's on the other side of the spectrum and they're feeling like that the opportunity of getting some help and getting some structure the days are behind them. And every gamut in between. We're talking today with Marilyn Shea. And Marilyn has a great theme for us. It's to make sure to not delay and begin your real estate plan today. Marilyn is actually the owner of Estate Preservation Group. And Marilyn, we're so delighted to have you in the Secret Stash today, Real Talk Radio. Thank you for coming aboard.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you betcha. Now, I know, for someone of your stature, I mean, you've been doing this for 30 plus years, but let's pretend that someone doesn't know who you are and what you do yet in San Diego as a local legend, right? So if you're going to introduce yourself for the first time, perhaps, what would that look like?
I'd say, well, I'm an estate planning attorney, and I help all different kinds of people. I help young families that are expecting their first baby that want to nominate the guardian of who would raise their children, rather than have their family go to court and have all the relatives argue about it.
Imagine that.
Which happens sometimes. But it's a good idea if you have children to nominate the guardian of who would raise them, because you don't want some person that you don't like raising them, maybe your sister-in-law. And on the other end, we're talking about planning for disability. We're talking about elders that think that they're going to be fine no matter what. But the reality is about 60% of those over 65 will spend some time in a nursing facility. And so we can have them plan for long-term care, which Medicare does not cover. As a little bit about my experience, I've been, as Jesse said, an attorney for over 30 years. Yeah. I teach continuing education courses to other attorneys. In fact, I have a course scheduled for next week. It's an all-day seminar with 3 faculty members, including myself, talking about some obscure kind of trusts and such. Not the basic living trust that we're going to be talking about today. I'm also past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys for Southern California. Wow. Elected by my peers, and that was in 2010 that I did that. It's good for the clients to know that when I speak to them, I speak in plain English, not legalese. Yeah. And also,
well, what's that mean though? That's an
plain English.
That can so easily get glossed over.
Let's talk about what plain English means. Let's talk about you're going to your doctor, and your doctor tells you that you have a myocardial infarction, or they use some term like that. Why don't they just tell you you had a heart attack? Everybody knows what a heart attack is.
Well, they want themselves to sound very official, right?
Right. And some attorneys talk like that. They talk in legalese. They talk even to me in legalese, which I think is kind of ridiculous. They could talk to me in plain English, but they choose to talk in code sections and stuff.
Sometimes, isn't that true that they want to kind of create a buffer between them? Like, it's almost like a form of lack of confidence, isn't it?
Well, sometimes it's lack of confidence, or they think it makes them look important if they speak in language that nobody else can understand. Right. But I found that people like it when I talk to them in plain English or explain what these legal documents are that we're doing in plain English. I said, this is why this means this. Or sometimes engineers come in and they want to know about every single sentence of the documents, what they mean. And so I explain it to them in plain English. And so I allow plenty of time to do that. In fact, unlike some attorneys that just prepare documents based on an interview with a client and send them out and bring them back to sign them. My first appointment with clients is very, very in-depth, and we ask them lots of questions. We talk about things that they wouldn't even have thought of as problems, and then we send out documents. We bring them back for an in-between appointment. The purpose of that is to make any changes to the documents that they want. Maybe someone's name might be spelled wrong because it's a multi-syllable word from Czechoslovakia that I had trouble spelling. And we make all the corrections if there are any, and we make any changes to the documents that they want.
And one of the things I think that I noticed that comes up in your approach is that you pride yourself on making things simple, and also what you might say is like very inclusive.
Right. I try to give them a step-by-step sheet on a yellow piece of paper so they know exactly where we are. Okay, we're at the first appointment. Okay, now we're going to send you out documents. We're going to put paper clips on the important pages. And then as the list goes on, it talks about calling for a draft appointment to discuss their changes and our questions. Mm-hmm. And then they send us things like a copy of their deed to their homes so that we can prepare one for those. And then we prepare letters for their various banks so they can change them to the trust.
Yeah.
And things like IRAs are treated differently, and we handle that as well.
There's so much stuff, obviously, that goes on, and I appreciate you giving us a laundry list or sort of a litany of what your day-to-day looks like. One of the things that I think is most interesting, and correct me if this isn't true for you as well, but let's say, it's almost like when everything is perfectly snug, then it goes really well. You don't really need a lot of stuff. But how many things actually behave that way, right? Usually things end up breaking somehow, and the worse that they break, the worse off the heirs become. One of the things that we notice in our real estate practice a lot is like when you deal with like second and third marriages.
Second and third marriages can be nightmarish. We try to make it really clear so that on the death of the first spouse, there's money set aside that the surviving spouse can use if necessary, but that money will go to the person that died first, children or grandchildren. And so that way they feel like they have some protection. It's not going to just all go to the second wife or the third wife or the fourth wife or whatever. And so a lot of people are concerned about this. They want their spouse to be able to use the money, but they want at least half of the money that they had when they were married to go to their own family if necessary.
Right, and that's an interesting thing too, because you start bringing blended families in to the conversation. What happens then, say, if it's not your kids? Like maybe it was your second wife's kids. Mm-hmm. What do you see sort of happen typically in that situation?
Well, sometimes we have to have a family meeting to kind of resolve these disputes and such. The documents are usually very, very clear, and we write them so that we kind of avoid this. The disputes sometimes will come up in the beginning. Actually, it's kind of interesting because a son or daughter will walk in with mom or dad, and I'll say, my parent wants me to have the house. And I say, well, how many siblings do you have? And they say 3. And I say, well, what are they getting? Oh, well, they're going to all share $10,000. And I explain, well, this is called undue influence, and it will be attacked later in a court of law. Yeah, so if your siblings really, really want you to have the house, let's have a family meeting and all sit down.
But Marilyn, I'm his favorite.
I know.
Yeah.
But you know what? This is called undue influence. And after you're gone, there could be a big lawsuit. And we want to avoid that. We don't want litigation later.
That's why we're hanging out with Marilyn Shea, owner of Estate Preservation Group, and you can check them out at estatepreservationgroup.com. Another thing, Marilyn, which comes up is, like you'd mentioned, heirs and siblings and stuff. What about like disability, right? Or maybe if one of the heirs has like a drug problem or isn't able to sort of, you know what I mean? Like, so what happens in those situations?
Well, we write language in the documents. We write language in the documents that if they're disabled, the money is held by the trustee for their benefit to not interfere with their governmental money that they might be getting. Mm-hmm. If they're irresponsible, we might delay their distributions until they're, 35, 40, 45, 50. One client wanted to delay the distributions to their child till they were 75. Wow. And I convinced them that wouldn't be a good idea. That they should at least give them
That's just
income
almost not
earlier.
Trying.
Yeah, well, they could give them income earlier, but they don't necessarily have to give them principal.
I see.
An age of reason to usually start giving people money is age 25 because they're not going to go out and buy a Corvette with the money. Yeah. But the trustee can use it to pay for their education and reasonable expenses associated with that. And that's a really good thing. So as far as planning for disability, sometimes we have a situation where no one's disabled. We have a husband and wife, and they have 2 children. Everybody's in perfect health. However, we have a situation where we want to plan for in the future in the documents. We want to put language in the documents that provides for this. Because down the road, they might have a grandchild, not even conceived yet.
Right.
And that grandchild can have
thinking that far down the road, typically.
But they could have an accident and be disabled when they're 2. So we want to make sure every possible situation is put in the documents.
Yeah.
It's called the what ifs, which can make my husband crazy sometimes because I talk about all the what ifs.
Yeah.
So, but it's important to put all the what ifs in the documents.
Yeah. Your husband's trying to live by the rule of spontaneity, and you're over there creating the documents of what ifs.
Right. Well, just in life, sometimes we have to talk about the what ifs.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we always go to the airport really, really early.
Yeah.
Because you don't know about what ifs could happen on the way.
Yeah, it's true. And then also, of course, just making sure that you do whatever you can to make sure that these disputes are resolved outside of court.
Absolutely. Court's very expensive. And sometimes we have an issue with a family. We can have a family meeting and a series of correspondence and such. And it might end up costing $2,500 instead of $40,000 for each person that's in the dispute.
And that's why Marilyn Shea says it's all in the documents, right?
It is.
Because if you've got some structure and plan around this, and that's another thing too, and I love that theme that you came up with today, which is it's even got a little ring to it so you can remember. It's don't delay, begin your real estate plan today.
It's estate planning.
Yeah.
Today.
Don't delay and begin your estate plan today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sounds good. Marilyn Shea, Estate Preservation Group. You can catch her, by the way, at 760-721-0600 and or over the web at estatepreservationgroup.com. So coming up, Marilyn, I want to try to get a little bit more into the details, perhaps, of this. Like one thing that we see come up quite a bit is how people hold title in real estate. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a bunch of great insight that you've got for Stash Nation around that. So, gang, stick around. ESPN Radio, Real Talk Radio. We'll be right back.